Hey, Dr. Brady, I want you to teach me how to start feeding a raw food diet. It'll be somewhat high level because I know there's some nuances, and I know you have a new course that goes super deep diving into it, which will be in the description. But I want to give some actionable items and tips to those pet parents who are currently feeding a dry food diet and they know that they want to start feeding a fresher food, but they don't really know where to start and they're really worried about bacteria and balancing and getting sick from feeding a raw meaty bone to their dog. So I want to talk about some of these things today. And honestly, there's very few people that are more qualified to do so than you. So I think this is going to be a huge episode together.
Yeah, let me at it. Like a dog
All
with a
right.
bone here. They're
Yeah.
perfect topics. I love them. Yes. Where do you want to start?
All right, so let's just start with where I think most people will begin, which is starting with a pre-made or store-bought raw food. And I want to also preface that you and I have already met and done a live talking about the science behind dry food versus raw food. So I will have that link down below for those
That
science
saves us time.
junkies.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of information there. This is really meant to, like, okay, I'm ready. I want to get started. I want to do it safely. So let's go back to where I think a lot of pet parents are going to start, which is feeding a store bought, pre made, commercially available food. And what are some of the things that we should maybe look for? What are some of the things that we should avoid? And we'll start with that.
Yeah. Okay. I can actually start one tiny step before that, actually, and just give 1 minute kind of pitch to people that are feeding dry food, that you can actually add things to the bowl. I mean, that is you don't have to jump straight in. Sometimes people hear the word fresh or raw. If you use the word raw, sometimes it makes people a little bit concerned. There's a lot of
Fair.
fear out there, and it'll certainly upset your vet if you use the word raw. But if you use the word fresh food, it's a lot easier for people to kind of digest, to pardon the pun. So it's hard to argue against the use of fresh food in animals. Raw food just puts people's backs up. But if you have dry food and you're feeding kibble, you can make that bowl better. I mean, it is made to AFCO minimal standards. So, we want the optimum for our pets. So we can improve that bowl. And Helsinki showed us, the University of Helsinki showed us, just adding in some bits of the bowl, 20% of the bowl, taking out 20% of the kibble and putting in some real food is really, really beneficial to dogs, just 20%. So that's adding in things like an egg. You could feed it scrambled if you think it has to be cooked. You can give them a tin of sardines or fresh sardines. I mean, your leftovers, anything can go into that bowl to improve it. So you can start off that way. And does my dog like beef? And it's like, well, have you tried cooking a little bit of beef and just sprinkling the meat to the side of the bowl and see which one he goes for first? They will never, ever, 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 ever take the kibble first. They'll always choose meat first. And you'll start with a bit of chicken, a bit of turkey, and you might half cook the turkey mince the next time. And so there's very easy ways to see the dog's reaction to the food he's meant to eat. And so you spend a week or two listening to Rachel's videos and having a think, and you can move the dog along. It's absolutely fine to mix the two. There's no digestive issues. There's no signs to say it'll upset them. There's no bacterial concerns. It's meat off the shelf at the supermarket. You can cook it initially. So often to say to people, if they're worried, if they're coming with worry and they're talking about fresh food, I would say it's probably a step too much for you. Most people, when they're ready to jump to what, it's like, tell me which product to buy and I'm ready to go. But if they're coming with fear and concern and there's people in their ear and they've read an article and it's like, okay, well, take a step back and just soup up the bowl a little bit. Everybody agrees, studies abound, adding anything to the bowl of dry food, from blueberries to colorful veg to fish oil tablets to meat. But studies show us that adding things into that bowl, the dog improves. It couldn't be 100% complete and balanced in that case, or else the dogs wouldn't improve. And these are studies of sled dogs and whatnot. So if there's fear jumping to a pre-made, I would say step back there. Maybe you're not quite right, not quite ready to make the leap to fresh food. But if you are jumping to a real food product, I would say pet shops are all over this conversation. If the pet shop is selling, if the pet shop has a raw dog food section, they know a lot about those products. They have thought about it a lot. They didn't just buy the freezers in for fun. They cost a lot of money to run those freezers. So it's a harder job selling fresh and raw dog food. There's more talk to have with the client. It's a tougher sell. Bag of dry food just walks off the shelf, sits on the shelf until it's ready to go. So what I'm saying is the pet shop owners know what products are good and bad and what will work for your dog. So listen to the people that are selling the products. They've got great advice. My advice would be, a little bit of research online just to see what people are talking about, join the groups, see what people are saying about whatever brand. There is economy brands, as there is in kibble. There's cheap brands and there's more expensive brands. But again, studies show when you look with a chemistry set and you look at the difference between the cheap kibbles and the more expensive ones, there's precious little difference between them. They can't tell the difference digestively, the amount of vitamins and minerals in it, the amount of meat in it, all very, very similar, even when prescription prices like that. With complete raw dog foods, there is differences, I believe. I think some brands you'll find they can, they can contain a little bit too much bone. Sometimes they can be a little bit too fatty. And it's hard for you as the consumer just to look at the packet and know all this, but your pet shop is going to know it. Your pet shop wants you happy, wants you coming back. So, there's some very obvious tips of picking pre-made. The first one is I don't like my pre-mades ground to mush, so I can't see it, like sausage meat. If I
Mhm.
can't see what I'm buying, I don't really trust it. Frankfurter meat, it's like, what is this animal that went into this? Is there any peas in it? So I kind of want to see the meat. I think some of the best raw dog foods are ground chunky, and you can see a little lump of liver, and you can see, meat. Um, Usually raw dog foods that use nice bits of meat and whatnot, they want to show that off. They want you to see it. Whereas if you're making sausages, it's pure pork fat. That's all it is. It's the hide of a pig. And so they don't want lumps of that in there. Nobody wants lumps of gristle. So there are some tips and tricks about picking pre-mades, but it's difficult for you standing in a pet shop to know because they're all covered up and they have a lovely sleeve with lovely images of a fillet steak and a roast potato on the front. And you're like, oh, I know fillet steak and roast potato. That looks great. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what's in the pack because we don't have a body going in checking these plants for the ingredients they're using and monitoring that. They monitor hazardous microbiology, which we'll get into in a minute with the next question. But they don't monitor exactly the protein fat contents of those products. So we hope that what the company is producing is true on the front of the label. But as we saw with dry pet food, constant issues where it wasn't what it says in the tin. And so that's a tricky issue. So I trust the pet shops more than anybody else because who else do you have to ask? So that's where I start. I pick their brains, see what they think, buy whatever you can afford, and know that you can also supplement those raw dog foods. You can add in meat to those. If you're buying a chicken and beef raw dog food, just buy some extra beef off the shelf at the supermarket. You're adding in some bits and pieces and you're making that raw dog food even better. Add some eggs in on top of it and that kind of thing. But any pre-made will do to start you off for sure. Anything is an improvement on high carb kibble.
Yeah, and I just have to go back for a second. First off, for those that are like, "Wait, he has some different terminology." You are from Ireland, which I love. So when you say things
Yeah.
like Frankenfurter and stuff, that's and like
Yeah.
mush and things like that's different than over here in the US, but I
Okay.
love that. But I want to go back a little bit because you made a really good point in the beginning that and I love this. I'm going to quote you on this, I think, and make a post about if you are nervous about feeding a fresh food diet, a raw food diet, you may not be ready to make that full transition today. It doesn't mean you won't be, because, and this is kind of an eye opening moment for me where you really should be confident in what you're feeding. And that's really why like I share the content that I do and sharing my opinions on foods and what to look for, not to tell people or what to feed or recommend a food per se. It's more of I want you to be informed so that you can make a decision you feel good about. And so Dr. Brady, it's interesting that you say that if you're sitting here and you're curious about it, but you're sweating bullets, maybe it's better to start by replacing 10 to 20% of that bowl of kibble with a fresh food, pet safe item. And I love that you gave examples of that. And I will say for those pet parents that are worried about what their veterinarian's going to say, I know because I get a lot of communication from conventional veterinarians, sometimes good, sometimes less than good. But I know that most of them will align that replacing 10% of the bowl, many will argue more, but even just 10% of the bowl of kibble with a nutrient dense, whole food, fresh food item, like Dr. Brady said, and no salt added sardines or some steamed broccoli, for example, or some ground beef. You can enhance your pet's health tremendously. And not only that, one thing I don't think we talk a lot about, Dr. Brady, not to go on a tangent, is
Yeah.
the enrichment about it. Like I think a lot of times, and I get wrapped up in this too, where I'm like, I'm going to add blueberries for antioxidants. But what about the thought of just adding some blueberries because it gives our dogs some variety? It gives them some
Yeah.
enrichment, right? Like, do you think there's any
Oh, yeah.
value in that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm a zoologist at heart, and you know, we I mean, even from the chewing point of view, you're not allowed to rear pigs as inhumanely as we do rear them without a chewing item. Chickens the same; they have to have something to peck. So, chewing from rats to humans, dogs, cats, every animal releases calming chemicals, dopamine. It's a reason why parrots will pull their feathers off. Chewing and self harm is something that you will do to get some form of relief. So, chewing is a really important part of life. But like as you said, like the blueberries, I mean, I don't even put blueberries in the bowl. I've got a Cocker Spaniel and he's crazy. I mean, 10 years later, it's crazy. And yeah, I'm a guide dog trainer. That really bothers my wife that the dog is nuts. But anyway, I would get some blueberries and, you know, people come over and Dudley's just going ape in the kitchen. And I'm like, yeah, that's my dog. Okay. Here, Dudley, do you want some blueberries? Phew, out into the back garden. And out he goes because he wants to use his nose. I mean, that is an incredibly that's behavioral enrichment is what it's called. It's what we do for zoo animals. We hang their food from the trees and we stuff it into holes for the predators. I mean, in Dublin Zoo, it's on a fast line where the dead rabbit is tied to a line and the cats have to chase it and pull it down. So, you know, we do that for other animals, but we don't seem to do it for our pets. We give them this, but they're super sensitive noses. 25% of their brain is olfaction. Can you imagine giving them these chemically preserved crackers for tea, the same stuff every day? You wouldn't do it to prisoners. And so there is a whole world of cool smelling stuff. Some things your dog will like, some things they won't. You know, you may offer your dog a piece of pork and they'll go, yeah, no thanks. So often when we're adding these things to the bowl, you're also learning. You're saying, what do you like, buddy? You know, and so instead of mixing it in one big mush, we put things to the side of the bowl. You'll start to see a lot of photographs online of people with serving platters nearly, very beautiful decorative flowers and everything, as if the dog gives a damn. But you know, when you're starting off initially, you might want to convince yourself, you know, um, does my dog want a sardine? Every single dog on the planet will want a sardine, but it's just nice to see his little tail go straight forward and boom, boom, boom. He wants to eat that. So, yeah, like you said, the blueberries, the little additions, your table scraps, and absolutely he wants that stuff. And every single time he'll eat that first before the kibble because he knows what he wants. And so it's a good learning curve. And so that way you're not jumping into it with fear. You're jumping when you're ready because you want to, because you're happy to, not because you've been forced or because somebody's twisting your arm. You know, often we're doing it for health reasons, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, I like that start. I think it's an easy start. Definitely a good idea.
Yeah, and I also love with my dog sometimes I just find a large plate or platter and put
Yeah,
different ingredients and then
yeah,
really watching what they
yeah,
choose first, like giving them the opportunity to do that. So, and I forget that your studies also include zoology, so of course you have
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
strong background.
I want to put in a cool bit here because in case I forget to say it later, there's a
Okay.
process I'm just going to type because I'm so used to using my own live thing. There's a process called Zoopharmacognosy. Okay, Zoopharmacognosy. Okay,
Okay.
so we'll spell it out later on. But there is a Marina Cassidy. I know her. Thanks, Marina. She's promoted herself. Great. I'll pay you later, Marina. The zoopharmacology is the process of animals knowing exactly what's in the food and taking it from a medicinal point of view. So your dog eating grass, if he's got, he's got tummy troubles and he's eating loads of grass. He'll eat specific types of grass. He might even eat a bit of muck. Humans do it too. Pregnant people will do it, chewing a bit of charcoal. And my wife chewing lots of apples last time. But so putting the food to the side of the bowl, the dog knows exactly what they need, but you can actually push that even further. You can do that with some of the additions like electrolytes. When you jump to raw dog food, you're jumping to a zero salt product. And salt is deeply nutritious. It's all your electrolytes. So when you're gut sick or stressed or sweating or working hard, you need electrolytes. And raw fed companies won't put salt in because it looks bad that they put salt in, but salt is great. So what we do is we offer the dog two types of water, plain fresh water and water with some salt dissolved in. And you just give it to your dog once or twice a week. And if your dog needs it, he'll take it. If he doesn't, he won't. You know, a lot of inflammatory conditions, your dog can be itching because he doesn't have enough magnesium, a common deficiency in dry food. You put down salt, he'll drink it. Some dogs will take a mouthful of salt water, others won't. So you can do that with spirulina. You can put spirulina to the side of the bowl. Spirulina is unbelievable, and gut sick dogs will eat a lot of it. Some dogs like it dry, some dogs like it in paste, but we don't mix it into their food because we're not quite sure if he needs this, or does he need chlorella, or does he need seaweed, or whatever. And so we get the spirulina, we put it in dry to the side of the bowl on the serving platter, Rachel was saying, or in a paste. And if the dog eats the spirulina, you just give him more and more and more until he stops eating it. It's called zoopharmacognosy. Insects do it, birds do it, chimps do it. All animals do it. And when you start watching the videos online, most people watching this sort of stuff are nerds for the subject. And so when you look at online and you see animals like, garlic is self-selected when you've got an infection in your gut. Chamomile is self-selected when you've got an inflammatory bowel. Couch grass when you've got liver disease. It's so interesting, and you can totally so putting the stuff to the side of the bowl, that's perfect zoopharmacology stuff. See what your dog likes first. But meat in studies is the number one thing selected virtually 100% of the time. They'll eat every bit of meat they can until they're full, and they leave I think carbohydrates at a maximum in dry fed dogs. Carbs, which is your potatoes, rice, pasta, and all the stuff they put in dry food, is about 7% of their diet at a maximum. So dogs, even dry-fed dogs that are used to eating high carbohydrate diets, when they're allowed to feed ad lib, the bit separated as we're saying, they use about 7% carbs. That is nothing in the bowl. They want meat and lots of it. So anyway, there you go. Sorry.
But wait, somebody's going to comment and they're going to say, but Dr. Brady, my veterinarian said that dogs have evolved. I know we talked about this before, but that my dog has evolved to be an omnivore because they can digest carbs, which is why we feed them these high starch dry foods. Again, we're not kibble shaming, but my question to you is, can you give me a high level science look into why our dogs are in fact facultative or scavenging carnivores depending on who you ask?
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole first section of the book, and I'll try get it out in 2 minutes. But cats can digest carbohydrates, and nobody's saying the cat is an omnivore, so they definitely can digest it. Dogs can digest carbs better than cats, almost twice as well. They can assimilate them. They can bring them into their body almost twice as well as cats, and they have a few more genes switched on for amylase production, which is the enzyme from the pancreas for digesting carbs. So somewhere along the line, dogs have been fed carbs in the past. That's just a fact. You wouldn't switch on those genes if it wasn't part of your diet. So we know in the past, as they evolved beside farmers for the most part, Akitas didn't, and Huskies didn't. And so they haven't actually extrapolated out that gene, but it doesn't stop them feeding high carb diets to Akitas. So there's the clue. But anyway, so dogs have taken these tiny steps. And so we look at that and say, okay, so what did the studies in the wild tell us? Truly feral dogs that don't go near humans, because when they go near humans, humans feed them plant matter, and studies show if you feed them plant matter young, they'll take it when they're older. Feral dogs don't eat plant matter. The studies we have of truly feral dogs that don't go near humans, highly carnivorous. Do some large studies done on that. So highly carnivorous animals left to their own devices. And then we feed them ad lib to see what will you take. I'll put some meat and veg and soy and corn and peas and all the stuff that Mars and Nestle are pushing on your dog. And they don't take those items. They take meat and bone and organ. They also have no physiological need for carbohydrates. Zero. That's what all the books say. That's what the dry food companies say. So omnivores can do with a bit of carbohydrates now and again, but dogs and cats switch into ketosis very quickly and happily. That's the process of making your own carbohydrates from protein and fat. And there's a number of other physiological quirks. You just know by the sheer shape of the mouth, the speed of the digestive tract. Everything about this animal is carnivory. Every single thing. But there has been some tiny, very interesting baby steps towards carbohydrate digestion. And that's interesting. Darwin would have given his eye teeth to have seen this at a genetic level, the start of evolution, these tiny steps. But what Mars and Nestle have done, this first time they realized this was 2013. And what Mars and Nestle and Colgate did was, see that study in 2013? That's why we feed them 60% carbohydrates. And it's like, well, what was the reason before that study came out? It's just a nonsense. And Doug Newman's answer to this was the best. He goes, just because I can digest carbohydrates doesn't mean 50% of my diet should be rum and cookies. And it's like, oh yeah, so it's just a nonsense to say, you can digest carbohydrates, so drink Coca-Cola and eat Mars bars. It's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. How much of that should I eat? Tiny amounts. Humans should be on 30% carbohydrates. Dogs are on 60%, and they're meat eaters. So there's a lot of nonsense around it. There was some nice little interesting facts in the background, and it was sullied and ruined by their need to sell carbs, which is the cheapest calorie on the planet. That's why it's in pet food. It's, but it's not the best one. That's not the optimum diet. Definitely nobody outside of pet food companies think that. There isn't any books being written about dogs eating kibble, how to make kibble, why dogs should have high carbohydrate diets. There's just a preponderance of canine nutrition books all saying the exact same thing. It's not a conspiracy on our part. It's company information or independent information, and that's where the carb bit lies.
Yeah.
It's with companies.
And you go much more into deep depth in this book, which I find fascinating. And this book, by the way, I'm not like trying to promote it too much, but kind of I am, because I love it. It's just packed with resources and references. So for those people that are like science junkies, this is the book. It'll be just linked in the description that you
Cool.
wrote. So, okay. So back to the point of this video. Thank you for
Yes.
going with me on
Yeah.
that little journey.
Yeah.
Looking at pre-made raw. So to you like this idea of avoiding, or not as of feeding the more chunky grinds versus these
Yeah.
mush, which is interesting because that's not something, if we're not doing DIY here in the States, at least, we don't have a ton of brands. There's a few that have the more chunky grinds.
Ah.
And my dogs love the chunky grinds. We don't have a ton of that here.
Ah.
So this is interesting because I do notice that when I get the chunkier grinds or I do DIY, my dogs, there's just more enrichment to it. Like I said, they're chewing,
Yeah.
they're gnawing, they're pulling apart. And as you said, I love being able to see
You can see it.
the
Yeah.
ingredients. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
So,
the look, I was a manufacturer for 2 or 3 years, and I can tell you, if you wanted to make a cheap raw dog food, I could sell you chicken and beef raw dog food. The chicken will be carcass, and carcass is fat and bone. There's no meat on it. It's the whole definition of a carcass. So there's not a gram, there's not a pick of fat on it. And it'll be carcass, a lot of it, ground up with a little bit of beef matter, okay, a little bit of beef heart, maybe a bit of beef liver and kidney, and they'll call it complete. They'll add in a little bit of window dressing, a bit of kelp or something, and they would call it complete. That's cheap economy raw dog food, and you are paying the price 2 or 3 times the price of chicken off the shelf of the supermarket for that. And it would have been far superior had you just got those ingredients yourself and made it, and a third of the price. So that's the hazard we're in. We're in a position where people can grind up a lot of chicken fat and bone, and they'll just write 10% bone on the front. You can put in 30% chicken bone into a product, and you guys wouldn't know. The ratio, the magic ratio, everyone needs exact percentages. Coming off dry food, they have to know the exact percentages, as if they know that for their own diet, or how much calcium their kids need each day, or how much they gave them. They don't know, but it must be perfect for the dog, or he'll die. So this magic figure is 80-10-10, which is like lots of meat, 10% organ, 10% bone. Okay, that's the dog's diet in a nutshell. And the way where they got that from was they looked at a rat and they sucked all the water out of it and said, this looks like an ideal dog diet, and it's mainly muscle with a bit of organ and a bit of bone. Okay, so that's roughly what their prey animals are, give or take a bit. Other people say 70-10-10-10, which is 70% meat, muscle, 10% organ, 10% bone, and 10% plant matter, because you can get some cool bits and pieces in there. I totally subscribe to that one, by the way. I think the chain is just too deficient today to rely on it to provide all the nutrients we need now, particularly if you're feeding a lot of CAFO reared beef, which is reared on wheat and corn and not nutritious grass and everything else, because if you rear it on different things that it's used to, it ends up being a different nutrient quantity in the meat. For example, no omega-3 or vitamin D levels are out, stress hormones, all sorts of things. Anyway, so with these exact percentages, I don't think you have to worry too much about it, because when the raw dog food producers are making the cheap economy stuff, you can have 30% bone in the product. You'll never know. Your dogs will still do okay poos in it, because chickens are 10 weeks old when they're killed. So their bones are very soft, full of water, 50% water in chicken bones at 10 weeks. Compare that to cow bones at 2 years of age, half-ton beast with very hard, firm bones. Now, if your dog ate 20-30% beef bone, he'll be constipated instantly. He'll have really hard, firm poos, and he might even go to the vets on that. So raw dog food producers can't get away with putting in too much beef bone. So my point is, the economy brands, if you're grinding up chicken carcass, they'll grind that very, very fine, because they don't want you to see the fact that there's not a lot of meat muscle in it. And they're the breaks. If you don't have a lot of money, let's say you've got a Labrador and you've a Shepherd, at your feet, and you're looking at them going, oh no, I've got to 60-pound carnivore, and it happens to be the most expensive food on the planet because it's the most nutritious. It's the best food on the planet. How am I going to feed him the very best quality raw? Well, there's an argument for saying, for just being aware that when you buy some of the cheaper raws, you mightn't be getting everything that you hoped was in there. Don't forget the ratio of 70% meat, not 70% chicken carcass, it's 70% meat muscle. But then if I was feeding some of the cheaper raws to my Labrador, because times are hard at the moment, and then I'll just go down to the shops and I'll just buy chicken thighs. They are a wonderful cut of meat, and they come with a bone inside it, of course. So you'll have to get ready for that. And again, if you're not ready, if the fear is stopping you reaching for that, just buy normal meat and just add in a bit of beef muscle meat or chicken muscle meat or turkey meat in on top of the food, and you get a bit more meat muscle that way. I like buying chicken thighs because pound for pound, they're the cheapest cut out there. Lots of meat, bit of gristle, bit of bone. It's like a perfect meal for a dog, for my little Cocker Spaniel particularly. And so I like that as a nice little rounded way of doing it. But if the bone freaks you out, pause. You've just jumped too quick. Take a step back and just supplement your pre-made with a bit of meat that you can find around the place, your eggs, your sardines, and you meaty up your own little mix if you suspect you're dealing with a cheaper pre-made. The really good pre-mades are, in the US, exorbitantly expensive. I mean, my God, for a nation that eats so much meat, your pre-made raws are so expensive. And particularly if you're going after the outdoor reared, grass-fed brands, of which you've got about maybe 2 or 3, and the price per pound is, I just can't believe it. So it's tricky for you guys. So I don't want to rain on any of the raw dog food producers over there. I don't know them. I've never tried the brands. It's just what I know from over here, and it's what I think when I'm picking up raw dog food in the shops.
Yeah. And I love your tip of going to your local pet store, your independent pet store, your neighborhood pet store, and asking them for their thoughts on the brands in the freezer. And you mentioned before, you said we might not know what is or isn't in the food, but I encourage pet parents all the time to reach out to the manufacturer. Before I
Yeah,
feed any
it's a good
food,
idea.
if I haven't spoken to a founder, key decision maker, the formulator, I'm not going to be comfortable with it. And of course, right, we have to take their word for it. But for me, I'm like, can you put what I'm looking for in writing? I mean, I want to know what your sourcing is. I want to know the protein, the actual protein percent muscle meat. And
Yeah,
my
nice.
my question for you is, what are your concerns, if any, with using using a brand in the fresh food category that uses vitamin premixes or synthetic vitamins?
Yeah, so that's a hot topic. There's I see another great question there from Mama Bear, which I'll say afterwards. The premix thing. Okay, here's the thing. There is a brilliant pet food made in Australia by Matthew Murr. He's a vet of uh, you know, terrifying intellect. He's just brilliant, just a brilliant vet. And he would know more about nutrition than any of us. Just highly educated in the nutrition world to a biochemical kind of level where I am at. And he makes Lyka pet food, which is a Lyka, and it's a lightly cooked food which he uses as a stepping stone to bring the vets over on side in Australia, because they don't want to stock raw dog food. It's too much of a leap. It's too much of an admission that this dry food is complete opposite. They can't sell both products beside each other too easy, because if it's do no harm, you can't sell the one you think doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. So this is like a crossover product, and he this was his way. Also, you can make some medicinal products on cooked foods. There's some times when you might use it. Not against cooked food here. I'm a big fan of it now and again. So he makes this product, and he puts in a vitamin pack, okay, into some of them for different reasons. I mean, if you've got a dog with pancreatitis, they're going to need vitamin E big time. You've got a fat issue, you need more vitamin E. You've also got the problem of AFCO, FEDIAF over here, AFCO with their ridiculous, nonsensical nutritional guidelines, which when you look into the science of it, as I did, it's just nonsense. It's based on nonsense. There's no sense to any of it. It's real kind of it's studies of dry fed dogs fed vitamin and minerals from a conical flask. It's like, that's not real zinc. You need tiny amounts of real zinc. You need huge amounts of zinc oxide. So the problem we have is the guidelines say, if you want to say complete on your product, and manufacturers do, because they want you guys to buy it every month, get you on a subscription, that's how they can get a reliable income. They need to call it complete. If you want to call it complete, it has to hit these figures that AFCO plucked out of the sky to suit dry food manufacturers. Okay. Now you're creating a real food product that has to adhere to dry food principles that use huge amounts of very hard to digest minerals like zinc oxide, iron oxide, copper sulfate. Crap. Okay. So now you've got this product that has to have lots of zinc in it. That's a problem because when you've made up your perfect mix of meat and bone and organ and beautiful organic additions, suddenly your product is deficient in zinc. And it's like, how is that deficient in zinc? So there's a problem. And so some ingredients go in, vitamin E can be supplemented, zinc can be supplemented. Some will supplement with vitamin D, which
Mhm.
surely is unnecessary when you're putting liver in because there's enough vitamin D in liver. So there's some questions when they put in some vitamins and you go, why did you need to put that in? I mean, we've got enough. And then you can get B complex. So you'll see that being supplemented in some instances. But vitamins, no problem. If you want to supplement a product with vitamins, vitamins are readily absorbed by the body. They would be the good guys in the vitamin mineral industry. The science on vitamin supplementation is okay. It's not too bad. If they put a little bit of that in, I'm not panicking. Uh, but artificial vitamins are nothing like the real thing. For example, vitamin E, they can't make that whole hormone. It's a hormone more than anything. They can only make a little tiny bit of vitamin E. So when you get a vitamin E supplement, you're getting mixed tocopherols, maybe some tocotrienols, but you're not getting the complete compound. You're getting a small bit of it that they can make in the lab. They can't make the rest of it.
Right.
But look, it's vitamins is one thing. The problem is when they start supplementing with minerals, because minerals are inorganic elements. They're not from the land of the living. The body doesn't like them at the best of times. And when you bring them from a factory, the body really doesn't like them, doesn't absorb them. I don't trust them. I don't see the need for them. But the problem is if you're making a cooked product, you can't put in bone into the product. So
Right.
that means you've no calcium in the product, at least not enough. There's actually almost enough in green veg alone. Just to put 10% green veg in, you've nearly got enough calcium in the product. There's that much calcium in green veg. But anyway, they need to add calcium to that because they have to hit these levels that AFCO want to see in the product, even though they really don't apply to fresh food. And I don't need to get into the reads on almost every vitamin and mineral I could argue about. But so some companies need to put in some calcium if you're cooking the product, So there's a couple of reasons that come in that when you're manufacturing the product, why a nutritionist might decide to put in a vitamin and mineral. Maybe they want a kidney disease product. Maybe they've got pancreatitis in mind. Maybe they've got cancer, keto. Maybe they're putting in carbs into that one for some reason. And the person that's formulating has thought about it and thought, when I get asked a question about whatever, that will be the product that I'll recommend for these reasons. And so it's tricky. I like to do it with ingredients. I definitely think that's the best way. I think if I was going to supplement a product with vitamin E, you should just put in some wheat germ oil. It's like it's the highest. It's such an unbelievable gift from Mother Nature. The one processed oil that I like, wheat germ oil, where they process out the husk off the seed, then you've got the seed which they make flour from, and then there's a tiny heart of the seed that they can process out, and they squish it, and wheat germ oil comes out. There's no gluten in it, and it is incredibly vitamin E dense. If I was feeding dry dog food, it's one of the two nutrients I would definitely supplement my dog with, because studies show vitamin E is incredibly deficient in dry food. It dies away very quickly. That and omega-3, those two must go into dry-fed dogs, in my opinion. So you put the wheat germ oil to the side, and the fish oil tablet. Take what you want, buddy. So there's a good few. It's a tricky conversation. Some people turn their noses up at the vitamin packs, and yeah, you could definitely argue a bit. I would rather it wasn't. I wish it was done on ingredients, but if you are feeding intensely reared chicken and intensely reared beef, there is no way you're going to hit your vitamin and mineral levels on that. There's just no way. The soils are not what they were. Our lambs are not going to picking at flowers and acorns and stuff that would top them up in their vitamin E and zinc levels. So it's tricky. It's a tricky conversation. But yeah, I'd rather they weren't in there, but some of them aren't so bad,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know that humans and dogs are not the same, but I do think about myself. And years ago, I definitely would have been in the camp of, well, all nutrients should be coming from whole food sources only. Anything synthetic or premixes is evil, right? That was kind of my thought many years ago. But then I started looking at it like I will supplement in the wintertime with a vitamin D
Oh
supplement
yeah,
personally.
it's a
So
big one.
yeah, and sometimes I'll
Mm.
take some fish oil, sometimes I'll take some magnesium. So I was like, "Wait, if it's okay for me, why am I so paranoid when it comes to my dog?" So I think I'm
Yeah.
a very similar camp as you, as there's a time and a place. I think my biggest concern is when I see excessive amounts, especially in
Yeah.
like kibble, like a dry food. It just becomes concerning that it's what is the bioavailability of that is
Yeah.
where I get concerned. Or is there a bunch of liver added in that kibble and then they're adding copper supplements? It's like, are we
The
going to
copper one's
have,
a big problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been
There's
reading
layers on
about
top.
that and I'm like,
Mm.
man, that's
Yeah.
kind of scary.
It's the same with the like iodine. So I'm a seaweed guy over here, and the question comes in once a week. I've had to write 2 or 3 articles on it, and it's about iodine. The same way it used to be about garlic. If you talk about garlic, and you'll get a huge preponderance of people saying you can't. It's in the onion family, and it is. It's part of the allium group, but it doesn't contain any of the problem compound thiosulfate that onions do, which lay out dogs. And so all the hullabaloo about garlic was based on a single overdose study from years ago where they force fed beagles 125 grams of garlic. That's 25 cloves of garlic a day. I mean, that would lay out a Frenchman, let alone, a poor little beagle.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly medicinal product. So that's gone now. People have stopped fussing about it. And it's only really the vets really that are still a little bit upset about that one. But now it's things like iodine. And so they will say iodine is very dangerous to give to dogs. And I would say, well, iodine is an absolutely critical element. If you don't have it, you're dead. It runs your immune system, runs your thyroid, runs all your hormones. You need it in your diet. And if you're feeding intensively your chicken and beef, good luck getting that in your diet, because you're not going to get beef thyroid in your diet. That's where they'll find iodine. So you need iodine, and it's deficient in the soils. So we know, particularly U.S. soils, mono crop agriculture has depleted really key nutrients because we just top them up with nitrogen and what the other two, and we just put them on because it grows the plants quickly, but not nutritiously. So anyway, so iodine wrapped up in the plant seaweed doesn't seem to have the impact on the thyroid, and we know this from studies of Japanese people because they eat such a high iodine diet because they eat so much seaweed. Many, many, many times their RDA. The Japanese RDA of iodine is like 3 times what the US RDA of iodine is, and they blow that out many, many times, and they're fine. If anything, the longest living cultures, 2 of the blue zones, are near the Japanese islands. So we know that natural iodine bound up in food and with fiber particularly doesn't have the impact on the thyroid and releases loads of thyroxine, which is what can harm you. It turns out it's iodide from a conical flask. If you put a drop of that in the food, it has a massive reaction. It goes straight into the bloodstream. The body doesn't seem to be able to handle it. So iodide is one of the most trickiest. It's borderline poison. So nobody wants to put iodide in their products. They'll always put seaweed in because they don't want to mess with iodine. And it's the same with phosphorus and kidney disease. You must drop the phosphorus. Your dog's got kidney disease. Drop the protein, drop the phosphorus. The complete opposite to what you're supposed to do. I don't want to talk about it. Read my article on kidney disease. But studies show the more protein you feed a dog with chronic kidney disease, the better they do, not the worse. But phosphorus, it turns out, was the reason they're all upset about phosphorus is because phosphate used in ultra-processed food, not natural phosphorus. Natural phosphorus doesn't give this chronic negative impact on the kidneys, unlike the phosphate used in dry food. So again, it's complicated, and most of the issues come from the ridiculous supplementation in dry pet food. That's where all the headaches are. These issues, like your dog can chew on bones and it doesn't turn into a statue. A pregnant bitch can eat bones and produce all this milk, and it's totally normal. She'll produce normal pups. But if that pregnant bitch is given calcium supplements, it's dangerous. It's a dark art. So the idea is, through Zoopharmacognosy, you allow the dog to eat bones as you wish. Do you need more bones, buddy? She annihilates all the chicken wings that were given to her. We need more chicken wings. Or she doesn't eat them. Well, you don't need any more calcium. So the body handles that. And the reason for that is because in nature, minerals don't come to you in the same way every single day. Munch of grass and I've hit all my vitamins and minerals and amino acids. It's nonsense. There's no such thing as complete food. Prey or predators will take certain prey, take certain parts of prey at certain times of the year. They will walk hundreds of miles to get to a salt lick. Elephants, horses, big cats, they all do it. So, your nutrients come in waves over time, and your body has learned to store the ones that it really needs all the time. Make some of their own ones. The body can make amino acids, and it can make things from this and that. Like they can make their own vitamins from taking methionine and this to make this tryptophan. Like your gut flora kicks in to make vitamins and minerals that you mightn't find every day. It is such a complex system. but it doesn't overdose easy. It's used to getting, oh, here's a salt lick, whoa, and I'm eating huge quantities of sodium, and then you need some water, but you don't drop down dead of sodium, as
Right.
opposed to the other issues that we have. So a lot of the headaches are from the ridiculous science that they have, the George Jetson science, I call it, the protein pill way of trying to live. And it's not working. Studies of dogs compare dry and raw fed dogs show raw fed dogs win every single time. Not once will you show me a study of the opposite. So there's a lot of fear. I want to answer that question that was a Big Mama? Big Mama?
Oh, Mama
No,
Bear, she asked,
Mama. Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the premix or the pre-made and
Oh,
what
yes.
pre-mades that are more organs and no muscle meat.
Yeah. So what I was gonna call her Big Mama again. Sorry, what is it? Mama
Mama
Bear?
Bear.
Mama Bear. So what Mama
Yeah.
Bear was saying is that what about the premixes using lots of organ meat? There's a tricky bit that is, again, it's not I will just explain, is that there's two types of organ meat. Okay, so you've got meat muscle organ meat. So they're organ meats that you can eat lots of, no problem. For example, your heart, it's just a muscle. Boom, 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 boom. That's all it does. It's got a couple of other cool little bits and coenzyme Q10. All the stuff that hearts need is found in heart meat. All the stuff that brains need is found in brain meat. Your brain is 20% omega-3 DHA. If you want to get it, eat brain, 20% DHA. Anyway, so heart meat is just a muscle. So you can actually feed a lot of that to your dog as the muscle content of the diet. It's a filler that raw dog food companies use because beef heart is one of the cheapest parts of the cow to get. And so we will use beef heart as the beef muscle because all the beef meat goes to human sector. The very cheapest poorest quality beef, which is your head mince, goes for burgers. So that's where all your cheapest meat goes. And so what you're left with is organ meats. It's kind of hard to chop them up. They're a bit tougher to sell to humans. We're not used to eating them over here. And so they sell hearts. And another part is the tripe, the belly of the cow. Nobody wants to eat that. A few of the Eastern European countries is where Ireland sends all our tripe. We've got a lot of cattle here. But the belly can be washed in cold water. They call it bleaching. It's not bleach. And they wash it in cold water. And you've got this muscle that is used for pulverizing 5 or 6 kilos of grass at a time. And so that's a wonderful cut of meat. And your dogs can eat that, absolutely. So that's the sort of filler used in raw dog food, a bit of heart, a bit of tripe. The other organ meats, which is like your liver, your kidneys, your spleen, your brains, they have all sorts of functions. They're storage organs, they're endocrine organs, they produce hormones. And so you have to take it easy with them. If you give too much of some of them, your dog can have issues. Your pancreas produces all the enzymes, all your insulin, it's cool. But of all of them, liver is the most important, but it's also the one you don't feed too much of. So we'll say 5% of the diet seems like a perfectly good inclusion of liver, maybe 10%, but you got to draw a line at 10%. Any more than that, you're putting in quite a lot of vitamin A and D. Your dog's not going to drop down dead, but you will get black poos, black tarry poos. So anything over 20%. Now, if somebody wanted to create an issue in their dog, they would feed 50% raw liver every single day. And that's going to cause big problems to your dog because it has all this cool stuff in it, unlike heart and tripe, which is just meat. So we take it easy with those endocrine organs, with those excreting organs, we call them. And but you can just Google, like, a heart, your tongue is an organ, but it's just muscle, So there's some organs like gizzard and tongue and heart and tripe. Fine, feed as much as you like. But the raw dog food companies know this. So when they're making their pre-mades, believe me, they're not making a pre-made that has 50% liver in it, because there'll be too many people online that will just deluge their page and they will look like absolute idiots. So by the time they bring that product to market, they have talked or hired a few canine nutritionists. They've done a lot of reading. They don't want to get caught with their pants down when they release the product. So generally the organ meats they're using in abundance are the ones you can eat a lot of. It mightn't look as cool on the package. We want to see fillet steaks on the label, but it's meat to the dog. It's they're lucky to be getting it. So that's
interesting. You mentioned veterinary nutritionist. Do I need a veterinary nutritionist to DIY a homemade raw food diet?
Absolutely, categorically no. Absolutely no. You don't need an animal diet formulator. You don't need an Excel spreadsheet. Like, guys, you just got to think about it as you feed yourselves. As I keep on saying, you're feeding yourself. You're doing okay. If I was to look under the hood, Rachel, you're going to be deficient in a few bits because we can't be perfect at everything all the time. I was out with the lads for the weekend. What state am I under the hood? Not good. So most of us, studies of the US, the average US, Irish, UK populations, we are unbelievably deficient in some really key nutrients: zinc, magnesium, all the stuff that comes from eating high quality meat and forage. Really, we're eating 50-60% of our calories are coming from ultra processed food, so we are vitamin and mineral deficient. That's a fact. We all need B complex, we all need omega-3 and magnesium. But the point is, we're doing okay. We're going to school, we're thinking, we've got a job. I'm driving a car, I'm doing okay. And
Yeah.
that's what your dog's going to be like. Am I in perfect health? No, I could be in better health. If I was looked after the way I'm looking after my dog, I would be fit as a fiddle. But with your dog, you're going to do absolutely fine. Okay, your dog is no more precious than the kids, and nobody's told you how to feed a kid. As soon as the baby comes off mum, and I go, what will this eat now? Pair with
What will
potato.
this eat?
Yeah, it's just
Pair with
pair with
potato.
what? And it's a nightmare. And like, my kid's 6 and 4 now, and just eat that, finish that food, and they won't eat anything colorful. And it's like,
Yeah.
so, but they're doing okay, and they've got some good quality food, good quality ingredients, and the dog is the very same, and he's no more precious. So let's face it, he's no more complicated. Absolutely not. And I know just about as much about the dog's diet as I do about my child's diet. I have no idea where my kid gets her selenium from, manganese. I have no idea how much she's getting. Is she got enough vitamin D this winter? I have no idea. Should I supplement my kid with vitamin D? Probably. In the northern hemisphere, we get less sun, we wrap up, we protect ourselves from the cold, but also the sun. We're all vitamin D deficient. And when you go deficient in vitamin D, you get respiratory diseases. So like there's a lot to be said for the fact that yes, we have a few little issues in our own diet, but we're okay. And the same will be your dog. It's just a meatier pie chart. That's all it is. So it's lots of meat, bit of organ, bit of bone. That will be enough for your dog for 15 years of great life. You couldn't go wrong with that. Mix up your meats, variation. I think what people can get stuck in is that they do the same thing every day, the
Right.
same diet every day for months. And that would be a mistake, because you're just feeding a bit of chicken, bit of beef, and some carrots. And that's not ideal, because it's great, it's fab, your dog's lucky to get it. But after a few weeks or a month, we're thinking, there's other cool bits and other pieces. So mixing and varying up that diet as much as you can, bit of turkey, bit of fish, that's the way to do it. So, and get those organ meats in there. The variety of the organ meats is the tricky bit, because you can't find them in the shops anymore. It's not like this. You might find a bit of kidney, you might find a bit of liver, but there's no heart, there's no spleen, there's no pancreas, there's no brain, there's barely, there's no testicles. All that stuff is okay, but you're not going to find them in the average butcher, because butchers don't butcher their own meat anymore. They all
Right.
goes for central slaughtering. Sadly for the cows, it's a terrible way for it to go. And then the meat comes to butchers in packets, and then they sell them in packets. They never see a bone, they don't need a knife. So it's hard for people to find raw meaty bones and organ bits and pieces. So that's why buying pre-mades takes the edge off, because they've got the organ meat in there, the bit of bone. You kind of wonder, is there enough meat muscle in there? So what I do is pre-mades for 50-60% of his life, and then I add in bits and pieces. So I'm constantly, sometimes the dog gets a chicken thigh or two. If they're small chicken thighs, it's 2 chicken thighs out in the back garden, eat that. Out into the soil-based probiotics. Like, there's a reason dogs need that stuff in their life. Too much cleanliness in the dog's life, too much chemical compounds, too much chemical cleaning. That study that Habib shared there a while ago, dogs are X amount of times more prone to the forever chemicals that are in our homes.
Yeah.
Because, when you use this Dettol and stuff on your floor, or whatever chemical compound, I don't mean to pick on Dettol, I'm sure you have it over there. But
Pine Sol, I think, is our equivalent or
there you go.
something.
It's anything ending in all. It just sounds negative. But
Yeah.
so they some chemical, and then in 15 minutes your floor is dry, and it blows into the corners of the floor. The chemical does, the dust. I remember my kid was walking around with a soother in her mouth, and I just washed the floors and some anti-life chemical, and the soother drops out of her mouth onto the floor, and she goes to pick it up, and I run over and I pick it up and go, oh no, and I washed the soother, and I'm thinking, I just washed these floors, and I'm worried that the chemical I washed them in is on the soother that's going back in her mouth. I think, what am I doing here? And like instantly I was on to learning about probiotic floor cleaners, which are available from everyone, and they're cheap, a little cap into your mop bucket. But it means you've just eliminated an awful lot of chemicals. But dogs are nosy, they have no hands, and they sniff up the dust in your house. And so that stuff adds up. It takes away from his force fields of health. So I like feeding the dog off the ground outside as much as possible, a lot of natural feeding, get a Kong and have a bit of fun, bit of mash, bit of mince, whatever you've got left over, force that in there as well. Out into the back garden, dog. Go out there, enjoy yourself. Sometimes people freeze it in the summer, so the dog's got something to do for half an hour, and then they lie down and go to sleep because it's just like perfect. I've just had a lovely meal. As you do at the holidays, you eat a huge meal and then you go for a kip because you're a pig.
Yeah.
So that's a great, as opposed to 200 grams of rapidly digested peanuts and you eat it like a McDonald's and you're starving 20 minutes later and
Yeah.
angry. You know,
Yeah.
that can't be good.
So to get started in like a DIY, which I know in your course you go way more in depth, which I will have linked below for those who are like, okay, I'm ready to like start sourcing my own. Which, by the way, Mama Bear, thank you for all your contributions. Because
Yeah, good points here.
she's making some good points that I wanted to mention when you were talking about sourcing organ meats specifically, and even raw meaty bones. That in the U.S. we have a few good sources. Raw Feeding Miami is one that I've actually spoken to the owner, and she seems pretty legit. And then Hair Today is another one. So those are just a couple to explore. I go
Nice.
local farmers markets, and I am lucky enough to have a butcher that will have things like spleen and brain. Sometimes they
Mm,
know I have to ask for it,
yeah,
and they'll be like, oh, we have some in the back or something. So
yeah,
asking around and calling around can help. But to go back to my original question for DIY, what is kind of a good first step? Like I'm already feeding a pre-made, let's say, and something from the store, and I want to just start making it myself. Or you think it's just good enough to kind of follow the 80-10-10 rule, muscle meat, organ, liver? I mean, is that, and then some raw meaty bones, and go based on the
yeah.
size of my dog?
I think the first thing I would do is I wouldn't follow a recipe. I wouldn't
Okay.
go and look at a. I think, you know, look, people mean well when they're talking about the Excel spreadsheets, and this is exactly how much nutrients in 23 grams of blueberries. And it's like, how could you possibly know what the nutrient content is in my blueberries? Like, what age are they? What mountain did they come from? You know, are they from? Ours come from all over the place. Maybe all your blueberries grow in the US because the US is so enormous, but ours can just come from anywhere. You know, so you can't possibly know. Nobody can tell you the nutrient content of these bits and pieces. But similarly, when somebody gives you an exact recipe, initially it puts the fear of God in people, and they're like, I've got to follow this recipe absolutely perfectly. But you know, I would say, look, don't worry about a recipe initially. Initially, don't forget you can go on holidays for 2 weeks and drink margaritas and eat pizza. Okay, you're not going to drop down dead. You'll come back, you know, with nutritional deficiencies and you know all sorts of things, and but you aren't going to die. So your dog when you're getting used to this, as you're topping up the dry food bowl, when I'm making DIY for the dogs, the simplest diet will be some of the meat from the supermarket. So I'm buying some beef mince and I'm buying chicken pieces. Simple as that. And that is perfectly fine for your dog for God knows how long. If you wanted to make it a bit fancier, you'd add in an egg. I mean, talk about complete foods. So if you were to feed chicken thighs or chicken wings, if you're ready to make the leap, with meaty bones, which is an incredibly safe thing to do. We have studies of 600 or 200 dogs followed 6 years, not a single issue. All sorts of, we're a nation of millions. We haven't lost one yet. So it can happen. You know, I can't tell you to buy Lego or eat greens without telling you you won't choke, because you might. Bread rolls choke kids, chewing gum choke kids. It happens, but bones don't seem to be doing raw bones. But if you're ready to make the leap, I would go for something like chicken thighs, and I would just put in the same amount of beef mince initially. And I would see how that works on my dog. I'd do 1 part chicken thigh, so, you know, half a pound of chicken thighs and half a pound of beef mince for my Labrador. And I'd say, okay, buddy, there you go, eat that and see how you get on. And I monitor them. And if my dog's poo is a little bit too firm when it comes out, then I haven't added enough beef mince. Haven't given him enough meat. He's not as able for the bone as I thought. And then you know to give more meat. And so you initially start off by feeding your dog and seeing what he likes. Put a piece of apple on the side. Do you want the apple? 100% he'll eat the fruit. He'll eat anything sugary. So he now has a lovely egg. He's got a piece of chicken. He's got a piece of beef mince. And oh, Connor, he doesn't have his organ meats. Okay. So it's okay that you don't have your organ meats for a while, for a week or two. It doesn't matter. It's not that he's going to drop down dead for the need of vitamin D. There's vitamin D in red meat. There is bits in that what he needs is in that bowl, and it's fine. It'll get him through, no problem if you're on. So I would do that first before I run around thinking I can't start until I find a little bit of kidney, a little bit of heart. It's so stressful. You get to your butcher and the butcher goes, I've got a bit of liver. And you'll go, great, bit of liver. That's the most important one, everyone says. I'm sure if we looked into it, probably not true. But I mean, a bit of liver is easy enough to find. Any butcher will have liver because it's used in pate. So you'll find duck liver, lamb liver. The two of those are extremely expensive.
Mm.
Beef liver isn't used in pate. And so beef liver is really cheap to the point that butchers barely stock it because not a huge amount of people eat liver. But liver is the one you'll find in the supermarkets, the good meat shops, the good butchers. So if you can have a chicken thigh, some beef mince, an egg, and a little bit of liver, that is a beautiful diet. I mean, does it adhere to AFCO's complete guide? No, it probably doesn't. It's probably missing something that I haven't thought of. But as a first go, and you make up, I wouldn't just ever make just one meal, guys, because I'm busy. I'm putting out clip closed lunch boxes, not plastic bags, because if you freeze plastic bags, they get stuck and you're trying to pull the bag out from the mince, and it's such a pain because you never remember to take the food out, and it's annoying. Clip closed lunch boxes, because you take the lid off when you want to put your table scraps in there too, so it collects food that you're wasting, particularly the meat bits, but you can put anything you want. A little bit of cooked veg left over, that's into my dog's bowl. I don't waste a thing. So I would have a lunchbox on the go. I would have 6 or 7 of them in my freezer. One freezer drawer is all you need on the go. One freezer drawer will hold 6, 7, 8 kilos of food, 12 to 14 pounds of food.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at my dog and I go, okay, he needs a pound of food a day. Okay, he's a big boy and he needs a pound of food a day, which is quite a lot of food. Okay, so you're talking short of a Labrador, 20-kilo dog, and a 40-pound, 50-pound dog. I'm not sure. Pounds is actually confusing me, so I'm just going to stick to using kilos. If my dog needs, kilos are so neat. The pounds don't add up to 1,000. That's the problem.
I know.
Why? How can
We
you
make
work
things
like
complicated over here.
Yeah, a mile is 5,000 feet, and it's like, what, 5,200 feet? How is that the figure you picked? Anyway, so what I do is I make enough food for the dog for 2 days or 3 days. Okay, so if my dog was eating a pound of food a day, I'd put 2 pounds of food a day in it. If my dog needed half a pound a day, I'd buy lunch boxes that hold a pound a day. So I'm only taking out a lunch box every second day. Do you know what I mean? So I take out that lunch box and I look at it and I go, the dog's going through that in 2 days. And there might only be one chicken thigh in there and a bit of beef mince. It doesn't matter if it's perfect in the bowl every time. I just know in 2 days he's going to eat that lunchbox. And so it becomes really easy. You've got all your lunch boxes there. You buy in your chicken thighs and your beef mince, your bit of liver. You got your few eggs. And I'm just like, chicken thigh, chicken thigh, chicken thigh, chicken thigh, chicken thigh, chicken thigh, scoop of beef mince, scoop of beef mince, scoop of beef mince into each one. Not too high a fat beef mince, by the way. Cheap beef mince, which you're tempted to use, is rocket fuel. It's really high in fat. I mean, it says 18% fat on it, which is the legal maximum here in Europe. It's probably the same in the US. There's a 5% fat beef mince, which is lean. There's 10% fat beef mince, which is in the middle. And there's 18% fat beef mince, which is rocket fuel. And 18% fat beef mince is the lowest grade beef mince you're allowed to feed to humans and call it beef mince. All right. Just so people understand, it's 18% fat beef mince. It's 70% water. It's only 12% protein, 18% fat, and only 12% protein. So it's far more fat than protein. If you give too much of that to your dog, he'll get fat. It's rocket fuel. So I tend to go for 10% beef fat mince at a maximum. It's a bit more pricey, but it's way better. So I just put it out, crack an egg into 2 or 3 of them. I've got some frozen fruit there, some blueberries, leftover bit of potato, pop that in. Who cares? Bit of this, maybe a grind of salt, easy as that. And your dog's bowls are made up, clip closed, into the freezer, spread them out a little bit. Don't just pack them into one big block because you want the stuff to freeze to keep it nice and fresh. So the mistake a lot of people make is they pack a freezer drawer with solid meat, but like the middle of that is not going to freeze. The freezers at home aren't very good. They're called plate freezers. Good freezers have wind and turbines and stuff. So spread out your lunch boxes. But eventually I've just got one meat drawer. So Dudley goes through a meat drawer and I'm making his food every 11, 12, 13 days. And I don't even think about it. It takes me about 15, 20 minutes. My butcher now collects the bits I need. I kind of have a bit of a relationship going. There's products over here where you can buy organ mixes. Organ's always the tricky bit. I like a bit of veg in his bowl. So when I'm making it up, his food, I'm actually cooking a tiny bit of the veg. I like to lightly cook the veg myself
Yeah,
because I think it's hard for dogs to break that stuff down. But I do want some of this stuff in there. So I make a little bit of carrots, a little bit of spinach, a bit of broccoli, whatever I have around. I lightly cook that a little bit, lightly cook my seeds. I like a few pumpkin seeds because it keeps the worms away and they're really nutritious. And so I pop a few of them in. So that's kind of simmering and cooling as I'm making the rest of it. And I would pop in my meat, as I said, but I'd buy an organ mix because I was a veggie for 10 years and it still repulses me, a lot of the organ meats. I'm a total
it
wuss for
does.
it.
It
Yeah,
does.
that stinks as well. So I'm like, oh, kidneys. And so I would just put a spoon of the organ mix into each one and then a bit of my veggie slop into it. I portion it out a little bit so it's different in the box. And, it's simple. It's done. And I have no idea if it's absolutely perfect, but I'd say it's better than 98% of the dogs that have been fed out there. And that's a perfectly normal average mix. If you look on my website on dogsfirst.ie, you'll see recipes of things like that. You can take out the chicken and use turkey instead. If you were using a whole turkey, you wouldn't need to add beef mince because there's loads of meat on a turkey. So you'd have this whole turkey. If I had shepherds, I'd buy a whole turkey and I'd party frost it and hack it up and then just put it back in the freezer. There you go. Eat a turkey leg, dog.
There you go.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
yeah,
It is actually really
yeah.
cool to watch
Totally.
too.
Bon
And
appetit. It's what
and for
it's
those,
what they want.
yeah. And I think, like, I know that there's probably some pet parents out there like me that just, even though what you're saying makes complete sense, gets paranoid, right? Like, what if they're not gonna, because it's just this propaganda, this marketing kind of makes us believe that every meal needs to be complete and balanced and perfect every time, even though you and I don't eat like that. So there are, like you said, you do have recipes on your website that people that are like, oh, I'm still
Yeah,
nervous, like, you can follow those recipes. I know you said that you don't necessarily need Excel sheets and things, but I personally will use Animal Diet Formulator sometimes, which is just a tool you can
yeah,
input these ingredients, and then it'll say based on AFCO or FEDIAF whether or not it's deficient. So there are tools out there for people that are like, oh, I want to do this, but I need it to be by the book. They're not
yeah.
quite ready
That'll
for
help.
that jump. Yeah, little help and guidance.
Yeah, yeah,
There's options out there for those people. But I think what you're trying to say is that I think we get a little too stressed and worried, and then we overanalyze, and then we end up not doing anything, and then we just kind of feed them this
yeah.
dry kibble. And
Analysis paralysis, they
there you
call it.
go. That's
Yeah,
the
and
term.
there's a reason why they've moved all the molecules and stuff up to the front of your anti-dandruff shampoo, which is like anti-yeast. It's a chemical anti-yeast product for your head. That's what dandruff shampoo is. And there's a reason there's molecules in the front of your pet food, and this is for Labradors, and this one's for retrievers. Completely different foods, of course. And it's just nonsense. But these technical, hard to pronounce, incredible science is there to convince you're not able to do it yourself. And your vet believes it too. That's how good this marketing is. So your vet is relieved when you are happy to buy the bag of Labrador food for dogs in January and you give it to the owner. So I don't think it needs to be that technical. If it did, we would know about it for our own kids. It doesn't need to be that way. It's not possible to manage that. But I do think the animal diet formula has a place for sure. I think once you've started off and you understand, oh, my dog likes chicken thighs or wings or doesn't, once you have those few things and the fear has left you a little bit, then yeah, ticking the box with an animal diet formula and a highlight something, you could do with a bit more vitamin E. And you go, seeds. I forgot about seeds. I've got seeds in the press. What seeds will I use? And
Yeah.
will I grind them up first? Sure, they can't digest them. So yeah, I think it's handy for that for sure. I just don't think it's the first way I would go. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do, and that's great as long as it's not putting the fear in you that you have to do it that way. I don't think it's pet food PTSD. That's all it is. It's just
Pet
I
food
yeah.
is that going to be your next book? Pet food PTSD. I think
Yeah,
that could work. I think that could
it'll
work.
be a series of numbers like in the Matrix. You'll have
Yeah.
a decoding thing first. It's there's money being made from like fear is the greatest motivator, and everything that you buy, from the jeans you wear, because I hope it'll make me look good, to the makeups that don't look ugly, to the perfect. Everything we do is fear based. Okay, I won't look cool enough if I don't have a new car, on and on and on. And they're doing it with pet food, and they're just kind of, it gets a little bit mad, and it's like, I am too busy. I'm just too busy I'm a 98% guy, and it'll have to do, dog, because he is better looked after than I am. And that's the diet this dog has is unbelievable. And we have good quality meats. We've got this wild meat. I pick a bit of venison. I've got this outdoor
Oh yeah.
foraging pigs. Like, he gets the best of bits and pieces. But other times, he's on a chicken thigh and he loves it. He's like, thanks, Dad. That was
Yeah.
great. You know, with his little stinky sardine breath. But on sardines, don't use the sardines in oil. That's cooked oil. Okay, so it totally negates the omega-3 you're trying to get from the sardines, which does survive
Mm.
the tinning process, the canning process. But you don't want plant oils. You don't want plant oils in your own diet at the best of times. Maybe a bit of olive oil, but all those other sunflower oils, canola oils is refined industrial garbage. So your dog definitely doesn't want those plant oils, and they're cooked at 120 degrees for 30 minutes. So no to the oils. Just use sardines in the no salt, or sardines in water, or even sardines in tomato paste if it's just pure tomato paste, because cooked tomato is high in lycopene, which is anti-cancer. Studies show in dogs and cats. Everybody likes a bit of it. Sometimes the cheaper sardines will put sugar in the tomato paste, and you're thinking, don't really want to add that in. But plain tomato paste, it's a fine little addition too. So, so often a meal for the dog. Somebody was saying, what about traveling? Look, you don't have to feed cooked every single day. If I'm traveling for 5 days and I'm in an RV, and I'm going through Arizona and it's hot, and the fridge is full of
Yeah.
my beer. Well, dog, you're gonna move on to some freeze dried pet food, or pity about you, dog, or he can have some of the eggs. Or what I tell people is that if you go back onto my Facebook page, Dogs First Ireland, have a look at a product we brought out there about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Copy it, okay? So what you can do is you can make your own dry food. So you would get some beef mince, you get some of your organ meats, your bit of veg or whatever you think it is, and you make this kind of meaty mix. And then you cut it 50-50 with, or you mix it 50-50 with like porridge, oatmeal. And so you'd make porridge oatmeal, and you'd make your meat mix, and you mush it all together, and you bake it in the oven. You actually have it about 2/3 of the meat mix and about a third of the porridge. The ingredients, the recipes are there for a couple of different types of dry food. If you wanted to make it AFCO complete, all you got to do is include the eggshell. So if you crack an egg into that mix, include the eggshell, and it hits the AFCO minimum nutritional profile. Anyway, we make this mush, this meat meal mush, and we put it in the baking tin about a centimeter thick, a little grind of salt, so your dog doesn't mind eating it. And you cook it low and slow in the oven. So you have just made this kind of dense, almost bendy meal bread stuff, and you chop that up, and you've just made the very best dry food ever. It's been made on lovely beef mince, your own organ meat. You've added in your own cool bits and pieces. He's got his omega-3, and he's got his herbs because he's got a bit of arthritis or kidneys, whatever. And you've tweaked it perfectly for the dog. And you chop it all up, and you keep it in a lunchbox or 2 or 3 lunchboxes. And because it's dry, it doesn't have to go in the freezer or the fridge. So you can travel on holidays. Now, you don't want to be crossing borders with it in your pockets or anything, because I'm sure
Yeah.
there's rules on meat. But like, then there's like dry food, there's freeze dried food, which is pretty good stuff. I mean, it's what our armies eat. And usually countries with big standing armies, the US and France and a few others, they've got loads of freeze drying facilities. So you guys will have pretty good quality, pretty reasonable, still very expensive freeze dried food for dogs. Perfectly good for the dog. He's on holidays. I mean, while you're on holidays, you can buy a tray of eggs, and you can just add an egg into every meal. And then
Yeah.
the dog's just got egg and freeze dried food. He'll be delighted. He'll eat anything. So that's what you do about traveling. It's not stressing so much. I know I keep talking about salt, and I wish I didn't, because a lot of people talking about
Are
salt
they
there.
getting oh, well,
Yeah,
that just means that we're gonna have to come back on here and do another live about salt,
yeah. Well,
because it sounds
listen,
like
I
that's a
love it. It's a
yeah, because
busy
I
group
think
now. Yeah,
yeah, it is. People are blowing up the chats. It's awesome. And um I'm actually interested personally to learn even more about salt. So if you guys are interested in about salt, leave comments on the video wherever you're watching and let us know, and we can come back and do another episode on that, because I know we're getting
yeah,
close to time, and I do want to make sure everyone here, because we have quite a few people here, remember that you do have, I put a picture here on the screen, there you go, courses on your website, and I like to share these. It's in the description below, so you can click there, or you can go to, I think it's drconnorbrady.com.
that's it.
Yeah, and I think this is the kind of stuff for pet parents that are in my community that they just eat up. And so I hope you guys take advantage of these, and explore these courses to really get this like more personalized deep dive experience. Because I think a lot of the fear, you mentioned this, Dr. Brady, that make a lot of decisions on fear, and I think a lot of that is stemming from unknown. So when I think we get this information and you back what you say up with science, especially in your book, I think it just gives us this wind of confidence that a lot of us
Yeah.
need, because there is so much fear. So I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I remember the guy that showed me. He was the guy that was selling raw dog food in Ireland at the time, and he was just a real calm. He's just like, "Oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it." And I remember thinking, I was like, "I'm a scientist. I will worry about it." And I
Yeah.
worried, and I just like 10 years later, I come out with this book, and I'm like thinking, "Oh, I've thought about that a bit too much." And like, and so I'm hoping that with the way I wrote the book as well, while it come with a bit of science, it's like the point of it is that behind dry food is the Wizard of Oz. It's a little guy peddling a machine. And when you peek behind the curtain and look at the signs supporting low protein, high carbohydrate, kibble, when you look at the science, you'll go, where is it? I thought there was going to be loads of science in this enormous manual on canine nutrition that Colgate Palmolive wrote, that who make own science to it. I'm reading the small animal clinical nutrition, and it's quite relieving. I'm like, oh right, sorry, okay. I totally thought there was loads of science here, but there isn't. And so people really don't like hearing that, particularly when they've taken this big leap to kibble and they've been defending it. And those people can take it almost like an insult. And it's like, it's not an insult, it's not an insult to ask you for the study that convinced you kibble was good for your dog. Where is it? Because I have to produce lots of science to show you fresh food is good for a dog, and you don't have to produce any science for kibble. So I think leave the fear, where it belongs, which is like, in the blog posts and the veterinary kind of stuff. And I'll just park it for the moment and just try feed your dog a few little bits and pieces and tell me he doesn't want to eat that food and he wouldn't benefit greatly from eating it. And then after a week or two of doing that, you've just started giving them crack. I mean, he's not gonna go back. They'll stop eating their kibble and off they go. They won't ever stop eating the kibble if you try and feed it them. So you'll always have it there if you need it. But I strongly advise you, particularly in these days, you want bang for buck, and you can feed your dog at a perfectly reasonable cost. Probably the same price as your dry dog food, to be honest with you. But when Brisbane Guide Dogs changed, Brisbane Guide Dogs in Australia changed 220 dogs in training from Mars dry food to raw. And the CEO of Chris Lane was interviewed by a Brisbane newspaper called the Courier Times. I'll give you the link if you ever want to share it, Rachel. And they enjoyed an 82% savings in vet bills. This is a charity with 220 dogs reporting an 82% savings in vet bills. And now we've got printed studies to show dogs suffer less inflammation, skin disease, ear disease, and gut disease. Some of those printed in Nature, our top journal. They are the top reasons for visiting the vet today. So it's not just about the cost of the food or how much the dog enjoys it. It's the health of the animal. Less trips to the vet, more years on his life. Life is too short, particularly his. So there's so many benefits out of it, but it has to start with convincing you that it's the right thing to do. So just take some small steps. Don't be worried about the science and the facts and the figures. Just make a bit of beef mince, offer to the dog, have a bit of fun with it, throw some blueberries out of the garden, and take it from there. That's the best way to start off.
Brilliant. I think this is so powerful. And I love your kind of calm, matter of fact, scientific based rationale around all this. I think that all of us need a little bit more of Dr. Brady in our life.
Well, listen, the calm is nice to hear because my dog's crazy, and I remember a trainer. Oh, he's like, this is years down the line. I've given up on him, but he's too smart, is what it is. He's too smart to listen to what I say. And I was talking to a trainer, and they said, "You know why he's nuts, don't you?" And I'm like, "No, he's a cocker spaniel, and that's the way they're bred." And he goes, "No, because you are." And I'm like, "What? I'm really calm." And he goes, "No, nobody thinks that about you." And I'm like, "Oh, what?" You've got this idea that, hey, I'm real relaxed. I'm not relaxed. I'm like a puppy chasing a crisp packet. I'm like, oh, pigeon, pigeon. But anyway, I just love the subject, and it's. I don't like seeing people ripped off, and there's a lot of. It's just common sense, and so, but it's a great world out here because once you start on this, then you look at natural ways to keep away the fleas or worms, or do I need to give vaccinations every year to a perfectly vaccinated dog? Many, many juicy questions that we could tuck into, but that's a whole other day. But start off with the nutrition, and wait till you see. You'll never go back.
Yeah, it is mind blowing. So
Yeah.
this is awesome. I'm so grateful for you and your time. I know you're highly busy. I just want to encourage everyone watching to please share this video. This is highly important. This will help keep your friends and family informed and help our pets live longer. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already ready, and make sure you're following Dr. Brady's socials. Are I believe it's Dogs First is
Dogs
where you
first.
can find it. Yep.
Yep.
Or so make sure you follow there, or you can go to his website, drconnorbrady.com,
Yeah,
to check out his courses, more information, recipes. So there's a lot of information there for you, a lot of value. And we'll definitely have to come back again, talk about salt and talk about maybe vaccines or just there's a lot of really good topics that I want to pick your brain
oh,
on.
there
So
is. There
yeah.
is, yeah.
So
But Marina Cassidy is pushing, and we do
yeah.
a show on Tuesday nights called Raw Pet Medics,
Yes.
and it's on Facebook. It's alive. It's 45 minutes. It's free, and I'm there with the two top natural vets in the world. I believe they're in the UK, and we just pick a subject each week. Sometimes we pick a nutrient, and most of the times we're picking a health condition. And then once a month we do FAQ. So if you're on there and you've got a question, we get into it. So you can check us out. That's 7 p.m. GMT. I have no idea what time that is in your area, but you can work it out from that. But
Yeah, 7
that's
p.m.
yeah,
GMT, and that's Raw Pet. Is it on the Facebook page? Is it called Raw Pet Medics?
Raw Pet Medics. Yeah, and we'll
Okay.
pop up superhero outfits. Yeah. Okay.
That's-
Yeah, so that's good for the questions. And we get into the nitty gritty, but you can go back through the Facebook page, and we're about to shift it over to a website at the moment. But there's 200 of them. I can't believe we've done 200 shows, and we do
wow.
live shows and seminars and stuff. They're all up there, and so but again, I think even before reading all this, the hard stuff, it's just about starting with bits in the bowl. I think that's probably the best information to start with people. But I think a lot of people here are incredibly switched on. These are way past starting. They've already
Yeah,
you can see they're pretty clued in. It's like I'm taking notes here, going, "Oh, that's a good idea."
yeah,
I'm not
that's a good
in that.
idea. Good
Yeah,
question. Well, and see, the value of social media is that, especially on my YouTube, the viewers that will watch this once this is published, not just streaming live, will be a lot of newbies, which is why I
oh,
tailor a
cool.
lot of content. But a lot of people that tune in live are definitely, these are my OGs. These are a lot of your
Yeah,
followers too. It seems
yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah,
This is awesome.
yeah.
But yes, people seem to love this, so I'm so grateful again. And with that, guys, again, thank you again for sharing in advance and getting the word of this video out there. I think it will be transformative for many pet parents. So with that, we're going to end the stream here. And again, thank you, Dr.